Drink it in, man.
Touchdown, Detroit Lions! Cornbread! Cornbread! Cornbread!
Drink it in, man.
Touchdown, Detroit Lions! Touchdown, Detroit Lions! Cornbread!
Detroit Koolaid. Detroit Koolaid. Drinkers, drink it in, everybody. Hold on. We'll drink it in here in a second. Drink it in, man. Double-sided cornbread.
Cornbread! Cornbread!
I can't even mess around. You've heard us say that a time or two here on the show because we got a big guest. He's returning. He's been busy with life, family, a little bit of football mixed in, but he's here today to talk NFL draft, strictly draft. Me and him could talk draft all day. It's Logan Lamorandier. You guys know who he is. Sports Illustrated, all Lions, draft guru, always has good takes, opinions. He's here to answer questions, get into all types of NFL draft topics. Logan, you're back. The Koolaid Cast. We are just blessed to have you, man. This is going to be really fun. How you doing?
Thanks, man. I'm really excited to be here. You know, haven't been doing too much draft talk lately, but yes, behind the scenes, deep into the night, just watching film and looking at all these players. So I'm really looking forward to it. I know we can talk forever on this stuff, but it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Incredible, man. Thank you so much for making time for it. Let's just dive right in. We're not going to talk about what's happening with the team or get the free agent recap. We just want to focus on the NFL draft today because before you know it, we'll be hearing this. Logan, I thought I'd just start with you. Big picture, your overall thoughts heading into this draft with a Lions focus. What would you say it is when you're talking broad strokes, strategies, kind of general things you're heading in thinking for our football team?
Yeah, this is kind of a weird spot for the Lions, not picking until the 29th pick, and it's because they're a good football team. And when you have a good football team, there's usually not a lot of big holes to fill. It's a lot of times just depth. You might be drafting players pretty high that might not even be immediate starters. So I think the Lions are afforded the luxury of really selecting best player available. And I think Brad Holmes has done that. And in years past, it's kind of worked out perfectly where, you know, top players have fallen at positions of need. But I think the Lions are getting to the point now where you're not only thinking about this year, you're also thinking about long-term future and really just spots that could be more depth spots for the time being. There's a lot of extensions that need to be handed out, but maybe some insurance could be drafted at certain spots just to, help, the Lions are going to have to start paying some of these guys too. And I think this draft will really help maybe at certain positions, keep certain spots on the roster a little lighter in salary with their contracts on a rookie contract. So really, I don't know where the Lions can go. Yes, there are certain positions that would make more sense immediately, and maybe there's a bigger hole there than at other spots, but I'm not going to rule out any position really outside of maybe a couple that the Lions wouldn't at least entertain, especially if one of their top players that falls down the board. We saw it last year and even the year before. The Lions don't have typically 32 first round players. A lot of times they have I can't remember what it was last year. I think it was 15, 16, but they ended up getting 4 of those players that they ranked as a first round player in the first 2 rounds. So it's definitely not how the draft always shakes out as who they prioritize or who the media prioritizes. It's who they like and getting the culture fit. So yeah, that's kind of the broad picture there. I think it's really, they can go a lot of different ways, and it's whoever they think is going to be the best fit. And who fits long term. It's not going to be a short term solution where they have to reach for anybody.
Nice. Yeah, you hit on so much there. I mean, you're picking later, better football team, young football team, also one, like you say, that you have to consider future extensions. You've got to take care of the now. Lots of balancing going on by Brad, always open for business, Holmes, and Dan freaking Campbell. But there's the thing that you hit on that I wanted to come back with sort of is this whole like list of quote unquote needs, which angers Brad Holmes so much, versus like who are you as Logan Lamorandier willing to throw out the needs for, because you really feel they're not only best player available, but they're just that big of a talent, or somebody that you feel like could just be on this team, whether a starter or not, right away, where you can just kind of throw out the basic needs that we all somewhat have on our brain or focus on, to be like, nope, that's the guy that Brad Holmes is going to think is too good that we got to have if they're sitting there at 29. You got any names on top of your brain there?
I mean, it's tough to say because at 29, there definitely could be more than a few players that everyone thinks is going to be a top 20 pick. And then all of a sudden they're there at 29, and there's a few teams ahead of the Lions that are selecting players that maybe the media doesn't feel like is a first round pick. So that's always tough to say who's going to be there. I look at the offensive line. There's a ton of offensive line talent in this draft. And there could be 8 or 9 offensive linemen selected in the first round. And like Jackson Powers Johnson is the guy I keep going to, where, some draft analysts have him as a, top 20 lock. Others I'm seeing it's like could potentially fall to the second round. And I just feel like there's a bunch of teams even ahead of the Lions, and including the Lions, where if he falls to them, I just feel like he's such a good culture fit. He'd be the long-term solution at guard, at right guard, and then backup possibilities this year for Frank Ragnow. And, the NFL has taken its toll on Frank Ragnow with all these injuries. You just don't know how much longer he has, and that's just pure speculation on my part. He loves the game, but eventually these injuries, I feel like they're going to catch up with him a little bit. But, it happens every year that the interior offensive line, there's always someone that's coming off the bench that's starting, and the Lions don't have a lot of depth there. So I think Jackson Powers Johnson's my favorite guy, is where if he slips to 29, I think it would just be someone you can't pass up. And I'll also say Johnny Newton too. He's kind of my other favorite defensive tackle from Illinois. Kind of a smaller 3-tech type of gap shooter, but he's also pretty solid against the run. Again, I feel like he shouldn't be there at 29, but the more draft analysts I read, it's every once in a while they're saying he's a late first, second round pick. So those are my two guys, and the 2 mock drafts I've done this year, those have actually been my 2 selections for the Lions.
Yeah, two very intriguing, good players. I guess like here on the pod, when me and Shop's been going back and forth, like I've been more in the mode of like, you have this window right now. It's hard for me to see them taking a player that doesn't have a decently good route to impacting the team. I know that they go for the long-term fits, they go for the talent, they go for the BPA, as we all like to say, but to me that's always kind of cheap when you just say, I'm going to take the best player. Like, aren't we always trying to take the best player? I feel like you're usually trying to take the best player at a position of need that can help your team right away, so your team will get better and you can move forward, unless they're a generational talent you can't pass up on. And then of course you can wait for them a little bit longer if they're buried behind a guy, a vet, whatever it may be. So with those guys you named, I like JPJ. It's just like, unless he's just straight up better than Graham Glasgow, which I could see, but you kind of just paid Graham for 2-3 years, whatever it works out on the contract details. Like, how's he going to come in and impact your team right away? And then Newton, to me, is a guy I like as well, but it's just sort of like adding to the D-line, which we're all proponents of. Like, hey, just add more bodies up front, rush the quarterback, inside, outside, whatever it is. But Do you think they're going to take that approach of, hey, even though we have a window, we're trying to win the Super Bowl, we can just stockpile a guy for a year and maybe he'll play a guard, maybe he'll play, snaps inside? Or do you think they will really like target their roster and say like, nope, we need a body here. We take the best player at that spot that's going to come in and really, not only get on the field, but make an impact and help win games. I think that's going to be something considered. You don't throw out the other side, but I don't think you negate it either and just take talent, tuck it away, and say, if we don't win, we'll just figure it out later. I don't think you could do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and like I mentioned earlier, the positions of need, there really aren't many of them right now. And cornerback is probably the biggest one, I would say. Wide receiver is up there, but it's not like there's necessarily glaring holes. But I look at interior offensive line and just the lack of depth there. And out of one of the three starters will get injured at some point in the year. And I think it is a need to have not only a backup, but if you can get a high potential player at pick 29, a lot of times those interior offensive linemen do slip to later the first round, just because it's not necessarily a flashy position or the positional value isn't as high as other positions. But I would argue that interior offensive line is it is a position of need because you need depth, and same with defensive tackle. I mean, outside of Reeder and Aleem, there's not much behind that right now. And I think Newton has, again, it's the ceiling that I like with Newton and Powers Johnson, where it's, if they're still floating around at 29, I think those are positions of need in terms of depth and a long-term option. But I don't think necessarily, yes, I said cornerback is the biggest position of need, but at the same time, it's not like there's a gaping hole there either. So I don't feel like the Lions have to reach, if it is a reach, for a cornerback. And then there'll probably be some decent cornerbacks available too, which, going down the list of players I do like, I'm fine with if the Lions drafted Koolaid at 29, Cooper DeJean. I'm kind of having the same ballpark as McKinstry. If either of those guys are there at 29, I'd be more than happy with that as well.
Kool-Aid would be big for the pod. You know what I'm saying?
Drink it in.
I'm sure you would love it.
That would be a dream scenario. Cooper DeJean to me is like a guy that you get 3 for 1. You get a corner that can probably also play some safety, some slot, and with all this, they completely revamped the return game, so he could be intriguing there as well. Gosh, I like a lot of the things you said. I'm just still trying to. I feel like the JPJ that you like, I'm willing to go with that, even if they kind of tuck him, because, like you said, we do have Sorsdahl there, who's an interior player that can play some tackle. But JPJ, you do need to either be him or Frazier or Barton, because they have center flex. You know what I mean? I think that is the big key there. Newton, it sounds like you're definitely writing off. My boy Big Denim, he seems to be looking the part from what I've seen a couple glimpses of him. He really looks like he's yoked up, ready to go, so it'd be nice to get something out of him. Aleem's coming into his own. DJ Reader, I like that signing. You had to like the signing of Kevin Zeitler, though, too. I mean, yeah, he might be a one-year deal, but I could see him being a couple years, and like I said, you took care of Graham, so I am a little more focused, I gotta admit, on corner, edge rush, some of those type positions early. Even wide receiver does intrigue me. Let's get into a couple of the names, some of which we've hit on, some of we haven't, in regards to the most common names and ones you'd be most intrigued by or how they fit. We've talked about Newton, Kool-Aid, JPJ. What's your thoughts on Latu, the kid from UCLA, who's kind of a polished pass rusher? If he was there, he's got some medical issues. Is that somebody that would intrigue you if he was to get to 29? Seems unlikely, but you never know.
Very much so. He's actually my top-rated pass rusher. I know the injury concerns are scary, but you just look at what he was doing at the college level and how polished he is, and athletically. Yeah, he isn't Dallas Turner, and not many people are Dallas Turner. But you still look at his numbers, and he has pretty close to elite testing numbers, but he just has everything. And I feel like he would be a Brad Holmes type of player, because Brad Holmes really doesn't, at least high in the draft, he doesn't take projects. He takes guys that were good football players in college that meet the athletic requisites. And I think Latu has all that. And in terms of just pass rush moves and his technique and just production, I think he's the best there is in this draft. And Dallas Turner, I'm an athlete guy. I'm big on athlete. You know that. It was kind of tough to have Latu in front of Turner and even Jared Verse, but just watching what he does, it's almost like, I'm not comparing him to Hutchinson, but Hutchinson, when he came out, he might not be the biggest freak athlete, but just everything he does is just, he just gets to the quarterback.
Technique and all
Right.
that, and the hustle, the ability to just get there, like you said, production at the end of the day. Can you get to the quarterback? Can you not? Latu definitely can. I'm glad you mentioned athlete versus, I don't know, football player, love for the game, versatility, intelligence, all the want to, maybe even like some local ties. What about my boy, Darius Robinson from Mizzou? This kid, I don't know, man. There's something about him where he's big and physical. My only drawback on him, to be honest, is that he's similar to my other boy, Josh Pascal. But this is a thick edge rusher from Detroit. Great kid. Can play the 1 through the 9. Just has everything I look for. And, he seems more reasonable at 29, and seems like everybody would be on board with that type of pick, too, if they did decide to go that route.
Right, and he had his most productive season, I would say, last year as an edge rusher, but just at his weight, he definitely is a John Kaminsky, Pascal type of player, and the Lions definitely have a role on their team for that. So it would be, I always get a little bit nervous with these tweener type of players, because you think it would be really easy. It's like the coordinators, all they have to do is play to the player's strengths, but it doesn't always necessarily work out that way. So that's like the one drawback I have with him, but there's so much to like about him. Being a local kid too, I wouldn't be upset with Robinson, but I just feel like there might be someone with more upside, and I would be very curious on what exactly they plan to use him, because it's not like Kaminsky and Pascal are necessarily, 3-down type of players. And with Robinson, would they still line him up on the outside and obvious pass downs, or they could probably move him inside and go against some guards? But looking at the 10-yard split of his, I want to say it was like a 1.73, which is pretty slow for an edge rusher, and even for a defensive tackle. I mean, you have other defensive tackles that have a faster 10-yard split than that, and that's your explosion off the ball. So that's something I really like to pay attention to, and I wish that was a little better. So he's.
Let me ask you this: do you think, based on what the Lions already have, because I remember when the former regime was here, we kept getting these big power players, and we just seemed slow, couldn't cover, couldn't have speed to get after the quarterback. Do you think we're at that point where you need more of a freaky speed rush player to complement Hutch, Pascal, Kaminsky, all those guys?
100%. And the Lions defense has changed pretty much every year, with certain things. And I give Aaron Glenn a lot of credit for that, because he has been someone who's played to players' strengths. But we already have Pascal and Kaminsky, which I feel like would be the role Robinson would be in. And the main role that I feel like we're missing is you look at what James Houston, once he went down with injury, the Lions didn't really have anyone for that role. And then at the end of the season, they were using Derek Barnes. They were trying Jack Campbell there. And it's I feel like they need a true, almost like a 3-4 outside backer to kind of fill that role, who can drop into cover occasionally, but it's also going to get to the quarterback quickly. You can have these big, powerful guys that can get to the quarterback, but I almost feel like they'd be better suited, obviously to have a healthy Houston, but to get someone more along those lines than another big-bodied player, which I feel like they already have with the guys I previously mentioned, and even Hutchinson. He can go inside. but I had
Let's
almost
bring up
like
the
more
name.
so of a 3-4 backer.
Let's bring up the name, Chop Robinson. A
Yeah.
lot of media types like him. He's pretty much a one-trick pony, if you ask me. Speed around the edge. I didn't see much else on tape, but he sure can fly off the tackle if he can get around you and if he can use his athleticism. Like, is that a Logan Lamorandier player, or do you have similar concerns maybe that I have? Because Chop really isn't on my radar. Not saying they won't like him or take him, but he hadn't been a player I've loved throughout the process.
Yeah, he's another great athlete, which you always feel like you can mold those athletes into something. Um, and I do feel like his film to me, you always just want to see more. But then you look at his testing numbers, and it's like across the board, his 10-yard split was a 1.54, which is just insane. Um, he's got decently long arms, just like average size arms for his size, but still above 250 pounds. So he's just one of those guys where I think Brad Holmes would like someone who had more production in college. That's what seems to be the type of guys he want to play. And I think Chop Robinson is a risk because you're betting on traits, and it's a first round pick. Usually a first round pick, you're going to want production and the athleticism, and Chop only fills really one of those. So I think it's just a gamble, but it does kind of fit that Sam backer role that the Lions have. So maybe they would be more interested than I'm thinking they would be.
Yeah, that'll be an interesting one. Let's do a couple rapid fire before we get our great sponsors in here. Take commercial break. Me and you could chat for hours about all this boola boola draft content, goodness that we got when it comes to players, picks, whatever. What if at 29 the Lions just said, screw it, we love Brian Branch, we love our other cover guys, but we think the best cover player at 29 is Mikey Sanders still from Michigan. How'd you feel about that?
Yeah, I know. I'm a Michigan guy, and there's plenty of Michigan fans that love him. And I think he's a good player, but in the
Here
first
comes the
round, there's the but. Yeah, I'm just not sold on him being a first round player. He's just a good football player, and he's feisty and can do it all. And Brian Branch is going to be playing more safety. The Lions could use a slot cornerback, but yeah, I actually don't have. I'd have to look it up. I think Sarah Still's right around like player 45 for me on my board that I'm still putting together, so it's not finalized. But yeah, he's outside of my first round, so I feel like that would be a reach. I think you're going to get a good football player. It's just the ceiling. You want a first round pick to have a high ceiling, and I don't know what Saren Still's ceiling would be. I don't think it would be necessarily like an elite corner.
You know why he gets the bump. You know why he's getting first round buzz, don't you, Logan? Football character, love for the game, gritty, grimy, fits everything that we're looking for. And even if he is similar to Brian Branch, now you got two slot players, two guys that can play the outside, two guys that can kick back if you need, it'll tackle. It's intriguing, but like you said, it's going to feel like a little bit of a reach, but you're not going to be able to argue with the player. Here's a name that like is almost the antithesis of that. I got some questions about his effort. I got questions about his production, things he's done in a couple years, a couple different schools. But like every time I see this player, I just think, oh my goodness, this guy looks the part in the uniform, and he just looks fluid and freaky and everything I want in a WR stud, possibly with high end ceiling, which I know you love. AD Adonai Mitchell. What do you think about him? That's been some buzz around the Lions at 29. Would you love it?
Yeah, I'm actually. Yeah, I'd be on board with that. He's the one receiver I think that his production could be better, but he has all the traits you look for at receiver, and I liked him. It's so tough to say at 29 because I feel like there's going to be better player availables, but if the Lions do go with the receiver in the first round, of the guys who I imagine could possibly be there, he would be my top choice. And just adding another speed element, a 4-3 guy to that offense, I think would be a lot of fun. And you get the size, the leaping ability. It'd be really fun to have him in the offense.
I think if they go receiver there, they're just telling you we are gonna try to outscore you. We are loaded everywhere. We're young everywhere, and we're just gonna be one of the funnest teams in the National Football League. Kind of like the Chiefs, who just take a receiver every year and seems to be working out pretty well for them. Logan, I'm gonna throw a bunch of names. You pick one or two, and then we'll hit our commercial break. So I'm looking at like TJ Tampa. We haven't talked about Lad McConkey. Regstraw, the corner from Mizzou, Nate Wiggins, Zach Frazier, Xavier Legette got a little bit of buzz there with that 29 pick a while back. Like, any of those names or another wild card you want to throw out as like I wouldn't mind it, I might even love it, or the people listening out there, you need to be ready but for this name to maybe be read off by the Detroit Lions around one.
Yeah, of all those names, I think the player I like best is Nate Wiggins, but considering he's 170 some pounds
Right.
and not known for his tackling, I just don't know if he's necessarily on the Lions board. But in terms of coverage and athleticism, he's got it, and he's 6 foot, so he's got decent height, but still semi short arms, which was kind of concerning for me. I think his arms were only a little over 30 inches, which typically in a cornerback you want height because it also means they have length in their arms and shorter arms. But yeah, I think he gets his hands on a lot of balls and was going against some top competition. Some of the other guys you mentioned, I feel like all those guys are kind of, you could see them maybe sneaking into round one for sure. But I feel like there's other players I like better, but it all comes down to the character, all your intangibles that you love to talk about.
Right.
I don't know these players personally. Maybe they're going to be a great fit and everything's going to work out well, but none of those guys to me, I would say are, home run first round picks. Who else was, I think like Graham Barton was another player I'd maybe bring up as a possibility. Projected more as a guard at the next level just due to shorter arms. Who else haven't we talked about? Xavier Legette. I know you mentioned him. I'm not super high on him. There was a lot of first round buzz. Rakestraw, you mentioned. I almost feel like I could see the Lions drafting Rakestraw just because of his character and his grittiness. But I don't know. He just doesn't check the box athletically. In terms of coverage, on film, I wasn't super impressed with what he did in coverage. And I know apparently he wasn't targeted all that much. And his counterpart, Abrams Drain, almost looked like the better cover corner, but maybe that's just because they didn't target Rakestraw. But to me, Rakestraw is just a mid-second round, that type of area. So what are some other guys you mentioned? I'm forgetting them.
Oh, you hit on most of them. I mean, I just threw out some names like Tampa as another corner option.
TJ Tampa.
Lad McConkey to me is another one that like seems like such a clean player that they might consider, but that would be another all offense, just figure the rest out later type of move. I don't know if I'm on board with that or not. You did what Logan Lamorandier does, which is you gave me arm length, shuttle times, and all I'm thinking about is fit and do these guys love the game. And the only spots I'm willing to like forget about that is kind of what you said about like A.D. Mitchell. Like, people are like, but look, he takes a couple plays off. He doesn't run every route to the fullest. Like, he's a stud number one athlete type receiver. Like, those guys do that. Go check everybody that's good. they don't act like Amon-Ra, that we know here in Detroit. So it's like, I can live with that, and I can also live with corners that have a little bit of that. But to your Nate Wiggins point, he does like the speed, athleticism, coverage, but like, I don't know. There's just some things I haven't liked about him, but his teammates seem to love him. And if he can cover and learns to be in the tackle game a little bit, I'll live with it, but he's not one of my favorites. So I think we hit on a lot, man.
At a certain point, the Lions have gone this route the past couple of years of getting these gritty, smaller cornerbacks. At a certain point, you got to get some guys that can cover. And if it comes at the expense of, maybe they're a liability here and there in the running game, so be it. But they have to find someone who can lock down some receivers, because they haven't had that since Darius Slay. And going back to McConkey, I do like McConkey. I think he has everything you look for in a receiver, and sometimes you just get overwhelmed a little bit with all the top receivers in the draft class and how big they are and how fast they are. But oftentimes there's mid-round receivers that come in and light the NFL on fire, and it's because they do all the things the receiver needs to do well. They catch the ball, they get open, which McConkey's good. And McConkey it's not like he's small. He's almost 6 foot, and he's still very fast, very shifty, probably, the smoothest route runner of any of the top guys. So I almost feel like I could see McConkey being a fit for the Lions too, just because Jared Goff,
love him.
I always look for players that can get open. He needs players who are running and getting open, and that's McConkey.
Yeah, that'd be a Jared Goff special, no question. Like, hey, we're about to pay you. We're going to take care of you again with this guy who's always open, fast, and smart, and will never hurt us off the field type of thing. So, hey, Logan, here's a big shocker. We barely took a breath. We got into 2 or 3 topics, and we're at 30 minutes. So me and you love to talk draft. We love to give it to the loyal listeners, the Kool-Aid drinkers out there. But we got to get those sponsors in. And then when we come back, I want to know about the Logan Big Board. I want to know about, is Brad Holmes trading up? Is he trading back? Is he sticking and picking? Some of your hopes and dreams for this draft, some of which we laid out, some we haven't got into. And then we'll just hype up the people, because I do think we're a couple draft pieces away from being in the big dance, being deep in the playoffs again, and giving this fan base really what they want. So hang tight, my man, everybody. We'll get our great sponsors in. We'll come back with Logan Lamorandier, Sports Illustrated All Lions. Go check out his content and all the other great writers and folks over at SI All Lions. And everybody, we'll be right back in a moment.
This episode is supported by FX's Clipped, the scandalous story of the 2014 Clippers owner's racist remarks captured on tape and heard around the world. The series charts the tape's impact on a dysfunctional basketball organization striving to win against their reputation as the most cursed team in the league. Starring Lawrence Fishburne, Jackie Weaver, Cleopatra Coleman, and Ed O'Neill. FX's Clipped, streaming June 4th, only on Hulu.
Jewelry isn't a gift you give just once. It's a way to remind your loved one of a beautiful moment every time they see it. Blue Nile can help you find the gift that says how you feel and says it beautifully, with expert guidance and a wide assortment of jewelry of the highest quality at the best price. Go to BlueNile.com and experience the convenience of shopping Blue Nile, the original online jeweler since 1999. That's BlueNile.com to find the perfect jewelry gift for any occasion. BlueNile.com.
All right, everybody. This goes out to my fantasy football fans out there. Now, you probably heard about Reality Sports Online, the most powerful fantasy sports platform where owners can build and manage their fantasy team like a real NFL general manager. But the question is, have you tried it? I mean, we're talking free agency, multi-year contracts, rookie drafts, multi-team trades. You could put franchise tags on guys. It's as close as you're going to get to being an NFL GM. But do you think it sounds complicated? It's not. I'm here to tell you it's the best thing about Reality Sports Online is it's just more fun than your normal fantasy league, but it doesn't take barely any more time. After all this, are you still not sure? I mean, come on now. You can test your general manager skills by going over to Reality Sports Online, call it RSO. Please go check out realitysportsonline.com right now. Kool-Aid drinkers, we're back. Thank you so much for listening to the sponsors, supporting the Koolaid Cast, going and checking out great writers and media personalities like Logan Lamorandier from Sports Illustrated All Lions. We got John Macaroon over there, the Doc doing his thing, and so many others. But Logan, we basically stuck on the first round. You know what I mean? I've got my favorites when I've been doing mock drafts, like, I don't know, Jonah Ellis, Brandon Fisk. Who else have I been drafting? I like Kyrie Jackson, the corner from Oregon. I mean, those are just top 2-3 rounds. And then as we get into the middle rounds, it's like, can we get a Zach Zenter and store him? Here's what I want to ask you. Like, before we get to the Logan big board or some other names you want to bring up, like, I've been real focused on strategy based on these players in this draft. Like, I feel like you can say BPA, you can say I'm going to take the best whatever, but to me, even if you take the best whatever, but there's lots of that later, you're hurting yourself. So like when I've been doing mocks, if you pass on corners, it's hard to find a corner around 2-3 that's you're going to love. It's hard to pass up on like an O lineman in rounds 1 or 2 and then think you're going to well, that's not true. There are some interior players, but there's some other players and positions where it just gets thin quick. So like, have you noticed this? And to me, is it fool's gold to have that like kind of steer your strategy? Be like, all right, if I feel like corners are light, I need to make that more of a priority early. Or if I feel like this position's deeper, wide receiver per se or whatever, I can hold my water, wait, and get a guy in rounds 3, 4, 5 that are going to be just as impactful maybe than a top interior lineman, let's say. So what do you think? And do you have a strategy heading in of deep positions, thin positions, or are you just like got a few guys targeted and you're taking whoever you feel's best?
You know, so corner is the one position, and maybe this is going against the grain, but I actually like quite a few mid-round cornerbacks that I think have potential. And, you know, if the Lions don't get one in the first round, I feel confident that they can still get a cornerback in the later rounds. And there's guys like Elijah Jones from Boston College. He's one of my players I'm probably a little bit more high on as a cornerback, and he's 6'1", ran in the 4.4s. You know, had 5 interceptions last year. He is, you know, looking at his PFF grades was really high. Chris Abrams-Drain, who is Rakestraw's teammate at Missouri, the cornerback, I mentioned him earlier. I like him, and I think he will probably be maybe, you know, second round pick. Both Florida State cornerbacks. I like Jerrion Jones. Again, I checks a lot of the boxes for me. Ran a 4.38, almost 6 foot. Had really good ball. You know, just I guess he didn't have as good as ball production as Renardo Green did, the other Florida State cornerback, but I liked him as well. And again, he's another guy who checks a lot of the boxes. So maybe I'm just falling for certain corners where I'm like, these guys check a lot of the boxes. And the Lions brought in Nehemiah Pritchett, the cornerback from Auburn. I think he was, again, looking at him, you know, ran in the 4.3s, 6 foot, decent coverage grade. Forced incompletion rate was, you know, almost 20%, which was really good. Another guy, Dwight McLaughlin from Arkansas, again, checks a lot of my boxes. I just feel like there's a lot of cornerbacks that I haven't seen whenever I do mock drafts that don't necessarily go all that high. And I'm just wondering to myself, why aren't these guys being drafted a little higher? And Kamal Haddon, I think is how you say his name, Tennessee. He's been a guy in my mock drafts I've been drafting in like the 6th, 7th round every single time. Like I'll gladly take him. He's get his hands on a bunch of balls last year. PFF grade was one of the top coverage grades. Not overly athletic, but you can just tell that he has a nose for the football. And that's really what I want out of some cornerbacks. The Lions need some playmakers at the cornerback position, and I think there are players late in the later round at cornerback that can do that. So cornerback just kind of took over, I feel like, this whole conversation. But
good counterpoints by you. I do feel like Brad Holmes as well calls himself a cornerback savant or a snob, as he said. So I could see him thinking he's going to wait and find some of those guys you mentioned. Green from Florida State is sort of on my radar, who you talked about. Brownlee from Louisville is a guy I've kind of taken to a bit. Max Milton from Rutgers. My boy Jarius Monroe from Tulane. I've been taking him in like every 7th round of my mocks, and then I was listening to a pod the other day, and they were like doing a Lions mock, and in round 6, they're like, you know who you need to get late? Monroe from Tulane, and they took him in the 6th. I was like, yeah, there we go. Just a random name that somehow they picked out that I've been loving since the start of the process. Just size. Tulane had a nice sneaky little defense and things like that. So you're right. There are some names. I guess like I just feel like if you're going to take more gambles, you might get more results like we've been getting, which is, okay, you took this guy in round 4. He's okay. But can he still cover a coffee table when it counts? Because I don't know. We've been seem to get burnt, roasted, toasted, and extra crispy a little too often. I'm looking at my Oakrey target board, and I'm loaded up with old linemen. I got plenty of wideouts. And, like, edge is thin. Corner feels a bit more thin. Interior D-line, thinner, even though there are some late-round targets. So it's kind of like, I don't know. It's I guess back to the question about strategy, like is there a way you would approach this one if you had to sort of say, I know I'm not taking just positions or need only, but you're also sort of sitting there going, man, I need to sort of attack it this way. Or I mean, I've taken wide receiver in like round 1 or 2, and then later in rounds 3, 4, 5, I'm sitting and going, man, I would love these wide receivers. Or same even with a interior that can play center. It's like I'm finding Nugent in like round 5 or 6 who I like. I'm finding other players from Penn State or the kid from Georgia, Van Prent. It's like I can find some of these guys later that I feel like might get by better, but you have to be willing to pass up the early guys. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and wide receiver, don't we say every year how deep the wide receiver class is? And I know there's a lot of really good receivers that are taken towards the top of the draft, but at the same time, there's Amon St. Brown's a perfect example that you can find really good receivers all throughout the draft. So I always have that a little bit in the back of my mind whenever I think the Lions, could take a potential receiver in the first round, like, or you could just get so-and-so, later in the draft. Ricky Pearsall, like that's a guy we haven't mentioned yet. Player, I think it would be a really solid receiver, and the Lions would probably have to take him in the 2nd round. But there's just so many different types of receivers, and I feel like with Ben Johnson's system, you can really plug and play a lot of different type of receivers, and maybe you just want different skill sets. Like the Lions are pretty much lacking a true X receiver right now, I would say, that more typical big-bodied possession receiver. But the Lions use their wide receivers almost interchangeably so often. I don't know how much that really matters. And then, on edge, I do feel like there's definitely tiers at edge, and I just don't know if I love any of the players at edge that I think will be available at 29. You got your top 3 guys, and then after that, you're looking at both Robinsons. One guy we haven't mentioned, Western Michigan, Marshawn Kneeland. He's been getting a lot of buzz lately.
I love him, yeah. There's so many. Like
I like him a lot too, yeah.
Like, do you like Trice? Do you like Adisa Isaac? Kneeland's on my list. Do you like my boy Jonah Ellis? I mean, again, we can't almost go into every player at every position because we'd be here for days, but like there's so many. That's what I'm saying. Like, how do we make this combo meal? That's what me and Chops did a week or 2 ago, which was make these combo meals of like, okay, if I take this here, I got to get this later. If I wait on this, what am I going to get? Or am I going to be sitting there in the mid rounds going, oh man, there's none of these that I like and I need one? Or does Brad Holmes really truly not care about any of this and just says, I'm going to strictly take the best player and figure out his depth chart later? I mean, he seems to do that. I just feel like the NFL, they almost lie to you and just say, we're just taking talent, when really it's a blend of talent, positions of need, depth charts, and also, like, again, the character. Do they fit? Dan Campbell said not everybody's going to fit us. So we're me and you and everybody that does this is trying to figure out who fits the Lions, who is a Lions guy, who would they take, who's going to fit in their culture, rather than just, oh, this is the top guy on my board. It's like they don't care if he's not a Lions player.
Yeah, I think, one edge defender that I like probably more than most. He's just a small school guy from Houston Christian. Jalix Hunt is his name. And he's 6'3", 250 something pounds. I want to say he was a former safety when he came into college at something like Cornell or like some Ivy League school. But then watching him, I mean, he's a super athlete. He's got super long arms at edge, and he plays like with a nastiness to him, and he just blows people up. And yes, it's a smaller school, so you're seeing him against lesser competition. But I just feel like he's someone that really stood out to me. Muhammad Kamara, Colorado State, is another player he's on the smaller side, but he's still almost 250, but he's just a stocky little guy. But his testing numbers, again, he had a 4.57 40, a sub 1.6 10-yard split, which is what I care about more, which is an elite time. And he's another guy he had really solid production, and I feel like is just so far down draft boards just because of his size, not having elite length. But he's just a guy who never quits, and I think that would be a good fit for the Lions in the later rounds if he's still floating around. But he's kind of been one of my favorites where I'm like, oh, he's still here in the fifth round. Like, how? I don't know, but I will take him.
There's just so much to get into. I guess like my question to you is, so the Logan big board, I always make fun of it when you come on because Amon-Ra St. Brown was 141 or whatever he was, and you kind of liked it, you didn't love it. Now he's balling. We have fun on all these different topics, but like, what's your board looking at? Like, how's your hopes and dreams? Like, I'm sure you've done a few mocks. Like, maybe give us kind of how a Logan mock is shaken out that you really enjoyed, because we've only really hit on the top rounds, a couple top positions, but like, again, putting that 7-round pie together is really what you got to try to do, where at the end you're like, man, that's going to be tasty right there. So give us some broad thoughts on the big board, the hopes, and then maybe what you could cook up or what you hope Brad Holmes cooks up, because he's going to be cooking in about a week.
Yeah, and so I don't feel like the Lions, I think the last mock draft I did, I left off an edge defender because I just didn't really feel like the value was always right when I was selecting players, or I thought someone else was better. I don't think the Lions are going to hit on necessarily every need that they have, and I don't think they have to. Once you start drafting players and you have depth at position, you can make trades. You can find ways to fill positions. So I don't necessarily go into drafts like I'll double up at corner or certain positions. I feel like, yeah, let's just keep drafting good players. And if there's come out of the draft without having a certain position that you want to hit on, so be it. They can find a way to get around it. But that's more the best player available strategy. And I think that's what Brad Holmes does. Has Brad Holmes ever necessarily filled every single top need every single year? I don't think he has.
It's not like a need checkbox, but I liked your point earlier about the production. He does have an eye for like those game changer types, or the guys that love ball that are just going to come in and produce. He's definitely not afraid of injuries. I think this offseason he was like, just because the guy was injured last year doesn't mean he's going to be injured next year. And just because the guy was hurt doesn't mean he's not the best player, based on talent. So it's like he sees that past some of these other things where people are like, oh, he was hurt for the last 2 years. That means he's always going to be hurt. But he's been burned with some of that as well. So I think he has a very unique approach to picking players and his draft strategy. I haven't really found out who those Brad Holmes guys are, where it's like, no matter what at 29, he's just turning the card in, absolutely loves the guy, like a Gibbs. or like the football character that he loved in Jack Campbell last year. I haven't really figured out who those guys are, but I know when I've been doing mocks, like I'm coming up with corner or rush player in round 1. I've been coming up with some more rush or complementary pieces in round 2, and then like 4 through 7 is where I'm filling out like interior O lineman. I'm filling out another wide receiver. I'm filling out an extra cornerback late in round 7 with my boy Monroe. So that's kind of how my stuff's been shaking out for the most part.
Yeah, and my big board, it's at this point is pretty fluid. All I try to do is I basically try to rank my players at if all these players were available. And I do give certain positions higher value just because of the nature of the position. If it's, a more valuable position, but I just try to really rank them as like, if the Lions didn't have any needs, like how would I draft these players? Like, would I take this guy over this guy? And that's kind of just what I go through the whole board. I'm like, I just keep moving players down. I'm like, would I take this guy or this guy? But once you get to, truthfully past probably, 150 at that point, all the players are just pretty much, you're picking out certain little traits that I like or a high potential or, I don't know. You're really, it's just really tough to sort out. Like this player is definitely better. It's more of like a tier. Once you get into after the third, probably after the 4th round, I feel like it's just tiers. It's like all these guys are kind of in the same bucket. Just pick your style of player that you'd like.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Even ranking, we've been doing some different things on the Okri and Chops 18, 28, 35, whatever tabs it's up to now, Google Sheet. Like we've done some positions. It's just hard to rank a player like versus another player at a different position, I found. But what we've done too is we kind of eliminate a lot of the guys that won't be there or that just not really worth ranking these QBs or these top wide receivers when we're never going to have a chance at them. So that slimmed out the process. I also kind of made myself a board, which is just like guys that I feel fit, guys that might be available, guys that I've taken in mocks, and makes it easier for me to sort of see 50 or 60 names rather than have a top 150 stacked A to Z, and then you're like, all these guys are going, or like you say after that, it's more of your flavor of ice cream type of thing. So I'm real excited. I do feel like this is a much more intriguing draft just because of the type of team we have. They do have the luxury of being both big picture thinkers or just finding that absolute talent, taking them and saying when you're ready, because they got other ball players that can do some things on both sides of the football. You want to keep the offensive line of strength. You want to beef up this defense. You want to be able to actually cover a wide receiver 1. That would be nice. We'll see what Carlton Davis and company can do. Brad Holmes sounds like he was just enthralled with the free agency. I felt like I like the guys, but I'm not going to do cartwheels for Carlton Davis, even though he does have a pretty fun, good drop, here on the show. He's named the Carlton. It's not unusual to be we know you're over there doing the dance, Logan, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, shout out. But
do you remember Alfonso Smith? Remember he did the Carlton as his touchdown celebration?
Absolutely, man. Classic stuff. That dance is just anybody that can pull it off, especially with some gusto. It's always going to be funny. But we'll see what Zeitler does. We'll see what Glasgow has. They were pretty, safe again. They didn't make any big splashes. Let me ask you this to kind of round things out. Like the draft is in Detroit. We know Brad Holmes is kind of that. He's got a lot of moxie. He's got a lot of alpha. He seems like he has a feel for the moment. But then the other side of the coin is like he's very, what does he say? Strategic, intentional on what he does. So do you think he'll have a feel for the moment and want to do something big for the city and make a big splash by moving up? Do you think he'll take a very safe player that Detroit will have no, beef with, like an interior lineman or a big defender on the interior or a safe player of some sort? Or do you think he'll really just go big when it comes to actual draft time in Detroit, Can he actually sit there till 29? Does he have the cojones to trade out, or do you think he's coming up to get a player that the city's going to go, wow, now we're rolling, look out?
I could see him doing anything. If I had to take a guess, I feel like he'll trade up, even for like Levi Onwuzurike. There's when he wanted to move up back into the first round to get him, and they still got him in the second. And that hasn't really worked out. That's one of the few mistakes that he's probably made. But I just think, the Lions are starting to get to the point where, there's a few holes on their team. If they see a difference maker at a position of need, I could definitely see Brad Holmes moving up to go get the player that they want. And the Lions don't have as much draft capital this year to play with. And they traded away a third-round pick for Carlton Davis. So I don't necessarily know what they'd be trading up for, especially if they move up, like 10 spots in the first. But I will give Holmes credit. He typically he never gets fleeced in trades. If anything, I feel like, even with Minnesota and, all the trades he's made, it's always like, man, that's really good value. And he just got X player, like, who shouldn't, like, that's actually really good. So anything Brad Holmes does, I can give my opinion on it, but I have full confidence, and I know full well that Brad Holmes knows way more than I ever will about this draft. And even as much time as I spend on it, Brad Holmes just kind of has the hall pass right now of like, anything you do that I disagree with, like, I'm gonna straight up trust it.
Exactly. He's got that from all of us. Plus, he's got the 1 year special where he always gets these guys that plug holes or give us depth for 1 year discounted prices, which we love. Keeps us rolling and will let us sign Saint and Goff and Hutch and Penne and all the guys we want to keep here for a long time. So it's all great stuff on that level. He's been doing great for our team. It's funny that you can be a guy known for, like, he'll do anything and trade up aggressively, and also a guy who every time you interview him, he's like, we're just gonna be strategic, we're gonna be intentional, we're gonna just, and he hasn't made a big trade necessarily for a player. In free agency, he hasn't made any big free agent splashes, but here we are 2-3 years later, and our football team's loaded with talent and balling. So, Logan, I know you haven't hit the mic for a while. We've talked about it a lot, but there's so much more we could get into. Did you want to round it out with just like where you're at with this team? Kind of what you're hoping for, your excitement level for this draft, but also just man, if they can hit on a couple of these things, like, you really think this could be the year where we get up over the top, win a bunch of ball games, and also, like, have a really fun team to watch on both offense and defense. I mean, I think that's where a lot of the fan base is at.
Yeah, and like I mentioned to start the show, really, it's a unique spot to be in right now for most Lions fans. If Brad Holmes is able to find a couple key contributors from this draft, that's going to be bigger than anything, because they don't have a high pick. Really, Brad Holmes has just selected the players that he should select, when the Penei Sewells and the Hutchinsons, where it seemed very obvious, like, yeah, take that guy. This year could be very different, but last year, even with what he did with Brian Branch and Sam Laporta, all these mid-round picks that he's hit on, if he can continue that, I mean, it's just going to be super impressive, because it's not easy to do. Not many GMs can do that. But the Lions are in a really good spot right now, and that's why it's so encouraging. And it's like, this draft, if he hits on this draft, think of the players that they already brought in through free agency and hitting on another draft class. They're just going to be set up for a really long time. They already are set up with their young core. But this draft, if he's able to do it again, it's going to be amazing. And we got a long time. The Lions are really good.
Cap space, young talent, draft picks, still the ability to make a big splash when needed. Drink it in, everybody.
Drink it in, man.
Logan, I can't thank you enough, man. You were gracious with your time as always. You brought it, content. We could have done mocks. We could have talked more late players. We could have went back and forth on so many guys, but I think we gave the people a lot to think about. Like I said, just always so fortunate and glad to have you on the Koolaid Cast and get to know you a bit. And this is our time of year, man. NFL draft. It's crazy that we're recording here, and it's about a week and a couple days, and you know the draft will be in Detroit. The Lions will be on the clock before midnight or whatever, and we'll be adding more stud football players to this team, man. So absolutely fun time of year. So great to have you on, and thanks so much for doing it.
Oh, I appreciate it, man. It was great talking to some NFL draft. I know I feel like I just wanted to keep talking about all my 150 top players. I'm like, oh, I forgot to mention this guy. Oh, this guy too. This guy. But I know we'll have to
give your own show. We'll give you your own platform if you want it, and especially this time of year, we need more Logan Lamorandier content. But we know that life is crazy. We're all busy, but you just taking, we've been on here about, 45, 50, an hour, however long it's been. It feels like 5 minutes because there is so much to get into, but always love your stuff, man. And you're always welcome on here for sure.
Of course, man. Well, I appreciate it. And looking forward to the draft, and we'll have to talk sometime shortly after the draft.
No doubt, man. Just let us know. Everybody, that's what we got. Get hyped for the draft, for the Detroit Lions. New jerseys coming out before you know it. New uniforms. This team's going to be rolling. Hopefully we'll get an extension or two from some of our ballers. And you know what Brad Holmes does. You guys have seen the meme. You've seen the AI-generated dance of Brad Holmes on Twitter, on X. That thing's incredible. And he'll be dancing out on stage, getting after it once he makes these picks and gets our team rolling. So everybody, drink it in. Double-sided cornbread. And we'll catch you next time right here on the Detroit Koolaid Cast. Take care, everybody. We're out.
Pack the bag, start the plane. This game is over. It is over. What a comeback by the Lions. Drink it in.